Really pleased to welcome Patrick E. Horrigan to the show. He's got a book out called American Scholar that we're featuring here on Author's Corner, and the book is really fascinating. It's about James Fitzgerald. This is the novel. This is the character who likes his life, and he's got this pretty stable academic career. He's teaching American literature and has a comfortable life in Brooklyn. And what's so fascinating to me about this novel is how Patrick E. Horrigan switches back and forth between the 80s and AIDS and modern day and just historical events that really change so much in our lives. So Patrick E. Horrigan, welcome to Author's Corner here on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Kate. I'm happy to be here.
What was it that drove you to write this novel?
So I entered graduate school in the late 1980s at Columbia University. And one of the first things I did was I joined a gay men's study group. And I became friends and then boyfriends with the guy who organized it, a guy named Gary. And this was my first real serious relationship as a gay man. And it was also the moment where I started plugging into the gay community and learning about my history as a gay man, the politics, and of course, AIDS was exploding all around us. So I started really sort of learning how to think about that and deal with that. And so I wanted to pay homage to this relationship and its impact on my life. So as you mentioned, I first tried writing it as a memoir, wasn't satisfied with the result, and then years later took it out of the drawer and decided to rewrite it as a novel. So that's what I did.
So tell us more about the character and what happens in the story.
So the main character, as you said, is James Fitzgerald. He's a middle-aged gay man. He's established, has a nice life, a good job, a long-term married relationship. But he's always going back in his mind to a pivotal early relationship that he had with somebody in the late 1980s. And he has sort of idolized that relationship and that person in his mind. And basically what happens in the novel is something triggers his memories of that relationship and of that time in his life. He would have been in his early 20s at the time. And so he kind of relives that time in his life while he's also going about his life in the present. And he kind of comes unraveled.
Oh, comes unraveled. And you're right about that. And we don't want to tell everyone everything, but you really do have like a crazy night where there's this kind of soul questioning that he goes through. And I think some people can even relate to this as you go back decades to something that's happened, and it's pretty traumatic. And then you mentioned it, how you think of things and how you make things different in your mind when it's decades later, especially about a relationship. For you, switching from, okay, I was going to do a memoir and now it's a novel. What was that like? What was the process like for you?
Well, it was so interesting. I love memoir and I like writing memoir, but when I wrote this as a memoir, almost everybody I showed it to was sort of scratching their heads and saying, I don't really understand what your point is. And a lot of people said, in particular, the figure of you, Patrick, in this memoir there's something obscure about him. So rewriting it many years later as a novel and fictionalizing the character, fictionalizing myself in the novel, really allowed me to figure out the story that I was trying to tell. I thought I knew what that story was when I'd written it as a memoir, but it turns out I didn't really. And the key was understanding what my role in the story was. And so I was able to kind of discover that by writing it as fiction.
And as you go along and you're writing it as fiction, were there points in the writing that you had like kind of one of those aha moments, like, this makes sense now? Because I would think in your mind, you're pulling from, and that's what good writers do, your real life experiences. Did you have some of those moments?
Absolutely. And I love that you asked that question, because that happened a lot. I'd been living with this story and my memories of that relationship for decades, and was sort of married to the story in my mind. And there were certain things about that story that I thought, well, I can't change that, because like that's so important and it really happened. It turns out, yes, you can. You can change anything in order to get to the real story that you're trying to tell, like real with a capital R, not like real from a journalistic point of view, but the real essence of the story. So yeah, I and it was so freeing and exciting to realize, like, no, I can move things around. I can change some dates. I can change certain characters' arcs, because now I know the story that I'm trying to tell. Yeah.
And then once you see it, and this is really a stretch maybe, but a lot of people describe it as, it's almost like giving birth. You have this book that's personal, but then you turned it into something so much different with amazing language and taking some of those liberties you were talking about and changing stories, mm-hmm. which you can do. And then it's out there. And what does that feel like?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. Well, I'll tell you, I love opportunities to share my work with people, to read my work, to talk about it like you and I are now. And what I always, and I felt this when I was a college professor, when you really discuss something with people and it's a real discussion, you're building something new. You're creating like new knowledge. So yes, I can go out there and say, I've written this novel, here's what it's about. But then when it really gets into back and forth with people about it, it's generating new stuff. And so that gives it a different kind of life. And I love that about it. And of course, I love hearing people's reaction to my work, but often you don't get that. Someone might say, I'm reading your novel, and I wait and wait for them to tell me what they thought. And sometimes, you don't get the answer you want, or you don't get any response. And so, it's a mixed bag, actually, once the book is out in the world.
I like that answer. Yep, mixed bag. By the way, you can get Patrick E. Horrigan's novel, American Scholar, that we've been talking about, on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever great books are sold. Also, I want to mention that Patrick has a website, also easy to remember. It's patrickhorrigan.com, patrickhorrigan.com. Patrick, when people read your book, and this can be a tough question, but I think it's something to think about. When people read your book, what do you hope they take away when they're finished? What do you hope that is?
Two things occur to me. One, I hope that readers feel as if they have been given the opportunity to kind of stand in the shoes of a gay man of a certain generation, specifically the generation of gay men who came of age right at the moment when the AIDS epidemic burst into view. And I think that's important, because that turning point in a gay man's life, where you start to explore your sexuality and you start to become part of the gay community, it's a transformative moment. And for that to also be the moment where people are dying all around you because of a sexually transmitted disease, young gay men like yourself, that is a shock to one's sense of reality and self, that I think is like no other. And so I hope readers get to experience that. The other thing I hope they take away is an appreciation for the design of the novel, the aesthetic of the novel, because it's very carefully constructed. So, and you mentioned this earlier, so that the reader understands how time is elastic. It's like an accordion. It moves, on one level, the way we all understand that time moves. But in our minds, sometimes it races, sometimes it slows down. And that's all played out in the design of the novel. And I hope readers enjoy discovering that.
Perfect place to end this. Patrick E. Horrigan, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much, Kate.